Well, in the time remaining, we're looking this month at Messianic Psalms. And so we're going to look at Psalm 22 and try to finish this today or tomorrow. I think we can do that. This is one of the great Messianic Psalms that predicts the suffering of Jesus. Messianic Psalms, just a word for Messiah, Psalms that point very specifically, either in a prophetic way or in some other way, very specifically to Jesus. And there are many, many of them, but there are a few that jump out as even stronger in terms of their prediction, their prophecy, and their essence being really all about Jesus. And this one is all about his suffering for us. And yet God leading him into that suffering, and God, there's this contrast between this is what I'm experiencing, but you are my God, you are still God, and you're going to bring me through this, and one day I'm going to celebrate. And there's this contrast. So we come today to verse 11. And we're going to read down through verse 21. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, for there is none to help. So Jesus was deserted. His disciples all ran. The closest one, while he was being surrounded in his trials, was Peter out at the fire at the courtyard of Caiaphas, who's denying him, cursing him and denying him, cursing and denying him. So there really was none to help as trouble drew near to Jesus. Verse 12, I think, pictures a lot of the final moments of Jesus' life, where he was surrounded at the temple every day the last week of his life, being questioned, interrogated, trying to be entrapped. They were trying to find a legal reason to kill him. When they couldn't find a legal reason to kill him, they did it illegally. They trumped up. They got the betrayal of Judas. They arrested him at night, and they basically had him put to death early the next morning before the public could really do a lot about it, or before justice could be served. Isn't it amazing that Jesus absorbed such great injustice, and in doing so, he was executing ultimate justice? That's a mind-blowing thought, that he didn't really get justice, but he was taking justice. He was God pouring out justice on himself, on your behalf and on my behalf, the justice we justly deserved. And that's a profound consideration. Verse 13, verse 12, many bulls have compassed me. Strong bulls of Bashan have beset me about. Bashan was a fertile region on the eastern side of Galilee. We call now the Golan Heights, real high hills, but it's very fertile. A lot of farming, a lot of agriculture. So it is known for its strength in terms of agrarian culture. Would have been known for strong bulls, obviously. Strong bulls have beset me round. So Jesus was surrounded by enemies, verse 13, in his trial, by the way, in his trials, his mock trials, that gaped upon me with their mouths as ravening and roaring lion. I'm poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. This is the crucifixion. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. This was evidenced by the spear that was thrust into his heart, and blood and water came flowing out. That's a direct fulfillment of that verse. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue cleaveth to my jaws. Do you remember him crying, I thirst? Thou hast brought me unto the dust of death. For dogs have compassed me about. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and feet. There it is. There's the crucifixion. I may tell all my bones. They look and stare upon me. You know, not one bone of Jesus was broken, but his bones would have been jolted out of joint as that cross, as he was beaten, first of all, but then as that cross was dropped into that hole with him hanging by his hands and feet. Verse 18, they parted my garments while he's on the cross. This was fulfilled. They parted my garments among them and cast lots upon my vesture. But be not thou far from me, O Lord. O my strength, haste to help me. Deliver my soul from the sword, my darling from the power of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth. For thou hast heard me from the horns of the unicorns. That's probably a reference to a shofar, a cry, a battle cry, the horn of an animal. That was heard me from the horns of the unicorns is probably sounding out a cry for help is the image there. And so Jesus on the cross suffering, but this is prophesied through David hundreds and hundreds of years before it ever happened. And this was all fulfilled very precisely in ways that Jesus could not have constructed or contrived. It's a huge validation of his identity. It's a huge validation of the sovereign, supernatural power of God, bringing to fruition the promise of all the Old Testament covenant and all that the followers of God were waiting on and looking forward to in terms of God providing a final ultimate sacrifice, God himself, a lamb. So Jesus did all this for me and for you. And this is why we celebrate Christmas. It's not simply, this hallmark idea of a quaint little stable and, a young couple with a precious baby. It's not all that warm and fuzzy, and it's raw, it's painful, it's bloody, and it's been bloody from the start. And it was for me. He came for me. And that's the statement that's been resonating in my heart and mind the last few weeks. I think we'll talk a little bit about that on Sunday. He came for us. He came to us. And he will here because he was willing to go there and get through that by the grace and strength of God. And because he cried, "Save me," from the lion's mouth, he can hear your cry, "Save me." He can answer your cry. He can respond to it. Now, I just want to get a foreshadowing, just a glance at verse 22. "I will declare thy name unto my brethren." Now, how could Jesus say that from the cross? How could he think that from the cross? Going through all the depths of that suffering and the grief of that execution, how could he say, "I will declare thy name unto my brethren"? Well, Jesus knew he was going to resurrect, and he knew in a few days he would be gathering with his disciples again and teaching them all of the Old Testament scriptures that pointed, teaching them this verse. Can you imagine sitting in a room with Jesus and having him navigate and teach, exposit Psalm 22, explaining the events that just happened to him, have been prophesied for hundreds of years, and the light bulbs coming on in the disciples' heads, the aha moments, the oh moments. And then when he pauses, I can just imagine this. He reads, "I will declare thy name unto my brethren," and just looks around and smiles. I could just see him smiling and saying, "Here we are. This is what he's doing." What an awesome moment that would have been. It's chilling to me.